We've all been hit by a high cell phone bill, and it's not fun. Well, Simple Mobile has decided that it doesn't have to be like that. Founded on the idea that your mobile phone is an extension of your own personal freedom, Simple Mobile is a great way to do wireless. It's very easy to join Simple. Just use your own GSM phone, purchase a Simple Mobile SIM card, activate one of Simple Mobile's unlimited plans, and then follow the easy process to set up Simple Mobile on your phone. That's it. It's called Simple for a reason. So start saving money on your phone bill with Simple Mobile. Click here or at the link in the description below to find out how you can get in on the simple way of going wireless. Google's new Nexus 6 smartphone is many things, but despite appearances, one thing it's not is an oversized Moto X. What does that mean to you? Let's find out. I'm Michael Fisher with Pocketnow, and this is Nexus 6 versus second-generation Moto X. It's understandable why some might think these are more similar than they actually are. Size difference aside, many of the cosmetic cues are identical, from the aluminum midplate to the curved chassis, from the camera's ring flash to the front-facing speakers, right down to the signature Motorola finger dimple around back. And yes, in the hand, these do feel similar, again with the exception of the Nexus's massive footprint. But those similarities are only skin deep. That skin is the first major difference here. Using Motorola's Moto Maker suite, the Moto X is available in 520 different color combinations, in everything from plastic to wood to 2 types of leather. The customization extends to personalized branding on the back and special greetings up front if you want them, and it all comes together to make the Moto X feel, well, personal. By contrast, the Nexus 6 is available in just 2 shades of somewhat slippery matte plastic. Even some parts of the hardware that seem identical aren't. And here's where the Nexus 6 makes up some ground. The Nexus enjoys dual front-firing speakers instead of just a single one, and its camera bears optical image stabilization, where the X's does not. The Nexus 6 includes a bundled turbocharger in the box and Qi wireless charging support, while the X always requires wires, and if you want to turbocharge it, you need to shell out 35 extra clams. And aside from the obvious differences in display size and density, the Nexus 6 also brings a nice touch with its panel, the ability to go super dim for nighttime readers, movie theater textures, or the super energy frugal. It carries the penalty of a pink tint at that setting, at least on some units, and you can accomplish a similar result with an app like Screen Dimmer on the Moto X, but it's nice to have this out of the box on the Nexus 5. Of course, part of the Nexus promise is faster Android updates than any other smartphone, so you can count that as a point for the larger phone too. Motorola is pretty quick to push updates to its X line, but as you can see here, we're still waiting for the official upgrade to the latest version on 2 separate Moto X units, so the Nexus continues to win here, which is as it should be. Still, even without Android Lollipop, the Moto X user experience just feels more complete. And at the risk of repeating ourselves, more personal too. You don't realize how often you use the Moto X's wave function to wake up the display until you don't have it anymore on the Nexus 6. You don't realize how handy it is to launch the camera with a flick of the wrist until you can't, and you have to rely on a finicky touch target instead. And you don't fully appreciate the little things, like asking your phone, "What's up?" with a custom-programmed trigger phrase, or getting your texts read aloud to you while you're driving, until you can't anymore. What's up?
Good evening, the time is 7:22 p.m. You received a notification from inbox at 7:21 p.m. Time for cold pizza and warm beer.
While owning a Nexus device still feels like being part of a somewhat exclusive club, owning a Moto X feels like being a member of a more fun club. And that's a feeling Motorola bolsters with seasonally appropriate boot animations and spotlight stories that land like little surprise gifts on the Moto X every few months. Let's talk optics. Though they offer identical resolution, the Sony camera sensors in use here are not the same. The Nexus 6 packs the newer sensor with a wider aperture and OIS, and it's powered by the Google Camera Viewfinder instead of the Motorola-written version on the Moto X. Neither is our favorite software for shooting, but the Nexus's is probably the easier one to adapt to. And the Nexus camera is also the one we prefer overall. Even in the balanced lighting of the great outdoors, the difference here is obvious. The Nexus 6 color reproduction is consistently good, whereas almost all of the Moto X results feature a greenish-yellow hue that's not attractive. The Moto X is also quicker to lose focus and more likely to produce noisy photos, especially in low light. In both standard and HDR shooting modes, the Nexus 6 does much better when the lights go down and the phasers come out. Strangely, things seem to flip around with the flash enabled, the Moto X reproducing colors accurately while the Nexus shows a kind of salmon tint. But that's not enough to damn the Nexus, given its excellent performance elsewhere, including on the front-facing camera. The Nexus 6 superiority is further demonstrated in video mode. Its authentic colors make for a less exciting video, but the amount of yellow in the Moto X output just makes it appear almost clownish. The Nexus auto exposure also adapts more quickly to changing brightness, and the optical stabilization helps smooth the shot some as well. More Nexus 6 video and photo samples coming in our full review later this week. The Nexus 6 also brings practical superiority over the X in a few ways. First of all, 2 speakers up front are certainly better than 1.
I'm just here reading the comments since I couldn't understand what he said. LOL. Good to see you back, Jaime. Good to see you too. What's the joke about his name? You're new here, aren't you? You don't even lift, bro.
And also, a bigger, newer phone means bigger storage, newer specs, and a bigger battery. With neither of these offering microSD expansion, you'll want all the storage you can get, and the Nexus 6 goes up to 64 gigs, while the Moto X maxes out at 32. But in specs, it's a mixed bag. With a Snapdragon 805 versus an 801, and 3 gigs of RAM versus the 2, you might think the Nexus 6 better at some high-demand games, and you might think it's snappier on the whole than the Moto X, but by and large, you'd be wrong. Running Android KitKat, the Moto X is smoother on a day-to-day basis than our Nexus 6 is on Lollipop. That said, the Nexus's specs do make it more future-proof. We have yet to experience a Lollipop on the Moto X, and we expect quick updates from Google to fix some of the performance issues we're seeing in any case. So we should see performance parity between these phones very soon. What we probably won't see is endurance parity, and this will be our final point, so we'll make it quick. On average, we've managed to get about an hour to an hour and a half more screen-on time from the Nexus 6 than from the Moto X. To be clear, we're not ecstatic about the figures on either phone. Each of these should be capable of much better endurance, the Nexus especially. But this is a comparison, not a review, and the Nexus 6 does better than the X in this regard. So the Nexus 6 brings, on the major points, a better camera, better endurance, better speakers, and a bigger, higher-res display. And further, it carries the cachet of the Nexus name, with all the quick updates that name implies. For the kind of hardcore Android devotee the Nexus family has always served, it's likely the better choice, and it's unquestionably the more powerful device overall. If that's what matters most to you, get the Nexus 6. But the Nexus is also $150 more expensive than the Moto X, a phone that brings much more customizability in hardware and many more thoughtful conveniences in software. Conveniences you can't find on the Nexus. The Moto X is also more comfortably sized for one-handed use, and yet it still packs a display that's plenty large for most folks. And of these two, it's the device we'd recommend for most folks, for a well-rounded Android experience. One more time, everyone, our full review of the Moto X is available at Pocketnow in the link in the description below, and our review of the Nexus 6 will be live at the same place as of December 3rd. If you enjoyed this comparison, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Till next time, this has been Michael Fisher with Pocketnow, asking you to tell me which one you would choose down in the comments. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.